for a treat. She is a tenured CC parent and leader. You may have followed her when she did our Instagram takeover, and she is an Instagram influencer. I would like to introduce to you Emily Phillip.
Hello. I am so excited to be here. I want to tell you a quick story before I get started. At lunch, one of my sons said, "Why is everyone here named Staff?" They're at the Navigator camp thing. We're like, dude. Okay. And then the other one said, "Mom, do I have to watch your speech?" And I was like, "No, buddy." He's like, "Good, because it's going to be boring." So I hope he's wrong. I hope for your sake that he's wrong. But it's been quite a long road for me since they asked me to speak back in November. You see, I have never spoken before in this kind of format. I have spoken lots of times to my own community, but that's a lot different than this. So you can imagine my mixture of feelings between delight, excitement, inadequacy, terror, especially sharing the stage with such giants of classical ed like Lee Bortons and Andrew Pudewa, who just prayed over me in the green room. I mean, because I was about to vomit. I was sitting in my seat about to vomit. I went in there and I told him that, and he just prayed over me and said, I'm going to be out there listening to you. And I was like, what? So anyway, but here I am. But you know what? If you would have asked me 13 years ago if I would be standing here speaking at a homeschool conference, not only would I have said absolutely not, but I would have said I wouldn't even be sitting in an audience of a homeschool conference, because my attitude towards homeschooling was just downright hostile. I grew up loving kids. My dream job was being a mom someday. But since I didn't have a husband or a family on the horizon because I was a mere teenager, I thought, well, I better have a career, something to do with myself. In the meantime, teaching seems like the right thing to do. So I applied for the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Scholarship, and I received it for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I began my teacher training to be an elementary education teacher. Towards the end of that training, the allure of teaching was definitely starting to wear off as I realized more and more how much of teaching has nothing to do with the kids. But I pressed on and graduated in 2005, and I took a summer job as a nanny. I loved being a nanny. And of course I did, because it's just being a mommy but junior varsity level. So I stayed with that family for 3 years. And during that time, I met my husband, Doug. I told him on our second date, I said, someday I'm gonna be a stay-at-home mom. Is that okay with you? Because I had no interest in wasting my time dating a guy who had different plans for his future wife. Thank goodness he was on board with that, so we proceeded and got married. So now that family was on the actual horizon, I thought, well, if I'm ever gonna start teaching, I better go ahead and start. So I took the first job that was offered to me, and it was at a Title I school in Durham, North Carolina. The principal who hired me was really well known for being super supportive, just an excellent principal to work for, so I was confident that it was gonna be a good situation. Unfortunately, she got transferred just a week before school started, maybe 2 weeks, against her wishes, and they brought in a brand new principal who not only was inexperienced, which isn't always a bad thing, but he was also the polar opposite of every great thing I'd heard about the original principal. He thought it would be a good idea to give me, a first-year teacher, 3 years out of training, the special education inclusion class, which means that most of the kids in my class had individualized education plans, not to mention the fact that only 2 kids in my class were even reading on grade level. I also had behavior issues, one of whose mother chewed me out in front of the principal, and he did nothing to support me. So to say that it wasn't the right fit is an understatement. I was downright miserable in this position. And because I was married and had a husband who could support us both on his income, I quit. I only taught for 12 weeks. I am not proud of that part of my life story, and I don't share it very often because I don't want to be known as a quitter. I'm not a quitter. You look through my life, I don't quit things, but I quit that. And so you're sitting there thinking, that's why she homeschools now. Nope. I still was like, not gonna homeschool because I don't want my kids to be weird. That is like the main reason. That was probably 90% of the reason why I did not want to homeschool someday. The other 10% is that I really thought that like public school kids had more opportunities. I really believed that. I just thought I would overcome all the downfalls of public education by being the most involved parent you ever did see. I would be in the classroom working every week. I would be in daily communication with the teacher. I would know what was going on in the class, and I could fill in all the gaps, all the things that were wrong. I would make them better. Turns out that wouldn't have happened. I've gotten to see some of my friends go through public school and try that method, and it just doesn't work out logistically, but I didn't know that. Before I had kids, I bumped into Lee Bortons. I actually went to church with Lee Bortons and their family when I was growing up. So I was actually in youth group with Robert. I bumped into her at a Worldview conference, and she said, "So you gonna homeschool someday?" I was like, actually, I don't remember exactly what I said, but what I do remember for sure that I said was a super, super rude, "No way. No way." I remember it being so rude. And one day after I had finally joined CC, I emailed her and I said, "I am so sorry. I don't know if you remember that, but I'm really sorry. That was super rude." My attitude at this point was just hostile, and it was all about just not wanting weird kids. I was talking to a friend last night on the way home, and I think it boils down to some really deep stuff, just not feeling cool myself as a kid and just not wanting my kids to be even worse off than I was socially. That's a side note and not anything I plan to say. But anywho, fast forward to 2010, and this is and we finally started our family, and this is the beautiful family that we ended up with. So the tall dude in the white is Barrett. He is 13. He finished Challenge A just like an hour ago, which is amazing. The dude in the middle with the navy shirt, so they're not twins, we just have a short one and a tall one. The dude in the blue is 10, his name is Hewitt, and it was his first year in Essentials this year. He did amazing. He was Napoleon Bonaparte, apparently the second most talked about or written about that we just learned about from Andrew Pudua. So he was Napoleon Bonaparte for Faces of History. We got Weston in the little leather jacket. He is a little awesome little dude. And then Fiona is our bookend and only girl. She is 6. So I've got them all spread out there. So it was Easter. Barrett, my oldest, was 4. And I was volunteering in the church nursery. I was assisted that day by a male, teenaged homeschool kid. I noted that whole morning how well-spoken he was, how he interacted so differently with me and the other kids, like different than I'd ever seen a teenager act. I was super, super impressed. And it was at that moment that I was like, what? I realized that God had been unbeknownst to me. I cannot look back and see where the movement was, but I realized I was at the edge of a decision cliff, and that was the push I needed over to say yes to homeschooling. So I went from hyper hostile to God just like, me. I didn't even realize it was happening, and there I was. The final push I needed was interacting with this incredible teenaged homeschool kid, and I thought, that's what I want my kids to be. Now, I will, side note, God has humbled me on that idol of having amazing kids just because we're homeschooling. But anywho, and my reasons for homeschooling, our reasons have of course very much broadened and grown well beyond just wanting amazing looking kids. But at that time, that was the final little push that I needed. So I got back in the car that day, I told Doug, I want to homeschool. And from moment one, he was supportive. And what a gift it is. We heard from somebody earlier, it is such a gift to have a supportive spouse. It's amazing. And he's gonna be directing Challenge 1 this year. So 2 director household over here. So pray for us too, because it will be tough for a year, but I'm sure it'll be better year number 2. On that same drive home, that Easter Sunday, after I declared our decision to homeschool, sweet little Barrett asked me some question. I don't even remember what he asked me, but what I do remember was the weight of responsibility just clanking down on my shoulders as I realized it's all up to me. Everything he has to know is it's up to me to teach him. Now, of course, I have since realized that is absolutely false. So false. Kids are going to learn people. We learn from so many different sources, so many different people, experiences, books, all kinds of things. It is not all up to me. What a freeing thing to realize. But at that moment, it was completely overwhelming. But we stayed steadfast in our decision and pressed on. However, I did say, but I'm not going to homeschool for high school. I was back to the whole, like, they have more opportunities in high school, so I want my kids to go to public high school. So I would always, if somebody said, oh, you're going to homeschool, yeah, but I'm sending them to public high school, don't worry. It was kind of a defense mechanism, to answer for my decision to homeschool. Anyway, as I started telling my friends, oh yes, I'm going to homeschool, I started to hear about CC. I was only hearing good things. And then one day on the phone, my mom said, well, you know, that's the curriculum that Lee Borton's, who went to our church, that's the one she started. And I was like, oh, we'll do that one then. So I joined a community. I didn't even go to an information meeting. Don't tell. You're not supposed to do that. But I did. And I was the worst open house guest that you ever saw. So I didn't bring any kids. I came late. I flitted in and out of classes being a distraction. I wasn't friendly. I went out to my car mid-morning to like eat my lunch by myself when it wasn't even lunchtime. And then I left when it was lunchtime. I don't know what they thought of me, but I had already made my decision. I had seen what I needed to see. I just needed to make sure. I needed to confirm one last time that they weren't all weirdos. So I pressed on, we started, and when Barrett was 5, and this wiggly little guy was absorbing so much, and I fell so hard and fast for CC. I was also realizing just how much I was learning, because I had the attitude of, well, I'm not a good memorizer. I have never had a skill of memorizing. I can't memorize anything, and I really stink at geography. Those were my 2 things. Like, I'm not a geography person. But here I was learning all these things, memorizing things right along with them, with hardly even any effort. It just like goes in you with music. I know we're not all that way, but so many of us just learn. If you just put it to song, it's like, boom, it's in there. So I was, like before the year even started at the beach, I had half the timeline memorized. It was so fun. So after the first year of CC, I was at the end of year ceremony, and my support representative approached me, and she said, Emily, CC is growing in our area, and we need to plan a new community. Will you direct? No, I will not. I am pregnant with our 4th. We're about to move. I am drowning in life. How can I also add directing? Absolutely not. To this day, I still don't know what she saw in me that she would know I would be a good director. This is kind of a side note. She's the best SR in the country. Her name's Allison Stinner. She's the best one. But that's just a side note. I had on multiple occasions looked at my director and noted how great she was with words, how amazing she was at praying. And for those 2 reasons alone, I said, I could never do what she does. I could never direct. So another side note for all of you guys, don't compare yourself to other people. Just because you have different gifts than someone else doesn't mean God can't still use you in a similar kind of position. So that is one thing I have learned about directing, because we have different gifts, but God has used us both mightily as directors. So by the end of that summer, God had grown the idea of directing in me, and so I finally said yes. I said yes because I do like being in charge. I like leading things, especially things I believe in and love, which absolutely CC fit that bill. I actually really like administrative tasks. So all of these things seem to fit my skill set. And I was also really attracted to the idea of having something that was mine, like my thing. This is my thing. So I got to shadow my director for my 2nd year of CC with the plans to launch the new community my 3rd year. The summer between getting asked to direct and finally saying yes, I attended my first practicum. I hope you're all going to practicum. It's practicum season. Our practicum is next week. But at that practicum, there was a Challenge Mom panel. That rocked my world. This is where, for the first time, I heard about all these skills the kids would learn, debate and logic, learning how to learn, learning how to think. I immediately recognized that those were skills that I lacked in my own education and that the culture at large absolutely lacks. And so I said, this is what I want for my kids. I want them to have these skills. I want them to get through school having these skills, and I need CC to help me do it. So I scrapped that safe line of sending the kids to high school for public school, and I said, we're gonna graduate them from CC. That is my intention. The thing that really did it for me was the talk about mock trial. And I'm so excited to finally next year we get to do mock trial. But just a couple weeks ago, I actually got to be a juror on a mock trial. It was my first time getting to see one or be a juror. And it was everything I could have imagined. It was so wonderful. So a little plug for all of you. I would say with Challenge B Kids and Down, make it a priority to go visit all of the, I think they're called capstone. I realized that yesterday. They're called capstone events. that all the different challenge levels do, because this is what helps you see the vision. This is what helps you, like we hear trust the process all the time. That can be so hard to do, but seeing it in action, that's where the faith comes from, because you get to see, oh, this is where we're going. Oh, that's what a kid who's actually been through it looks like. Oh, those are the skills in action. So go to those things and make it a priority to visit them. Go to the senior thesis things, go to the mock trial, go to all the debates, sit in a challenge class for more than 5 minutes. Go and sit in all morning. And if you're a director, have an open door. Even to people who aren't in your community, let them come and see. Those of us who have communities that aren't all the way to Challenge 4, we need you guys who have further than us to open your doors and say, come and see. Come and see this amazing program and how it looks later on. We need you. So please have your doors wide, wide open. And I lost my place, but that was a good plug, so it was worth it. Okay, so first year of directing. It was good, but my main memory was how lonely I was. I was surprised at how lonely I was, but I shouldn't have been, because I had launched without a close friend. So not only was I building a physical community, but I was also trying to make friends. And that takes time and intentionality and more time. So it was lonely. And I was learning to lead. I was messing up. I was needing forgiveness. But I actually just the other day came across in my little one-line-a-day journal that said, today was the last day of the first year, and it was so great. And it just highlighted for me that even though I know there were hard parts, the joyful parts far outweighed the hard parts. So far outweighed. And that's sort of like the quick synopsis of directing, in my opinion. There are very hard parts, but the joyful parts far outweigh the hard parts. So I made it through my first year, made it through the second year. The community's getting bigger, getting stronger. Year number 3, COVID hits. So we had our last 6 weeks on Zoom. And then in the summer, families were dropping like flies, and it looked like our facility wasn't gonna let us meet. It was pretty stressful. We made through that as well, though. And this year, today, I guess, was the last day of our 6th year as a community. So we had through Challenge B this year, and we're on schedule to add 1 a year in a very healthy way. So my community is the best. I'll talk more about it later. A lot of people ask me, what is the hardest part of directing? And I could summarize it by saying growing pains. It's recruiting tutors and dealing with their fears and their feelings of inadequacy and trying to convince them, you can do this and you can do it well. And it's dealing with families' decisions to leave, sometimes agreeing with their decision and sometimes not, and it being painful. And it's also dealing with expectations that people put on the community that don't feel fair. And we're supposed to be open-handed. Does your SR tell you that? Be open-handed, be open-handed. That is so much easier said than done. Because dealing with growing pains is hard and it hurts your heart. But it is such a great opportunity to give things to God. Every year I'm determined for it to hurt less. And every year it still hurts. But God comes through. It's like he's saying, watch me. Every year, it's like he's like, watch what I'm gonna do. I'm still hoping next year is gonna be a little bit better, but I know the reality is that because God created us for community and human relationship, and we're all sinful, there's going to be some pain involved. But it leads me to my favorite part of directing, and that is being forced to Jesus's feet. The summer before I started directing, another director gave me a really great piece of advice. She said, Emily, when you have a need in your community, pray boldly and ask God specifically to answer a certain prayer. So if you need 2 tutors, you say, Lord Jesus, I need 2 tutors and I need them by June 1st. If you need more 9-year-old girls, you say, Lord Jesus, I need 3 9-year-old girls by August 1st. You pray specifically and you watch what Jesus does. So I took her advice, and I have gotten to see God come through so often. Not always the way that I want him to, or in the time that I want him to, but always in the most perfect way. I've gotten to see his faithfulness over and over and over again. So one quick story I can tell you about that is the summer of COVID. when families were dropping like flies, I was watching our ability to pay our facility fee slip away. So I prayed, I said, Lord, I need 8 families. I need 8 new families to be able to pay this facility fee. And do you know, 1 week before the year started, I enrolled the 8th family. And I was able to share with that family what an answer to prayer they were and get to share in that joy with them. They found that so incredible that God had used them to answer this prayer. It can be hard to be patient and wait on God to come through, but seeing all the answered prayers is one of the biggest privileges of being a director. Another one of my favorite parts of directing is getting to know the families in such an intimate way. I love getting to connect families, especially when I am getting to know families, and then I'm like, that happened to you? Did you know it happened? And getting to connect people. So we actually have 2 families in our community who both lost children in infancy. And that's such a unique loss. And I was able to connect those families, and that is so special. You know, I think of my CC community as my people. I heard one of the other speakers talk about my people. They are definitely my people, and it's because we have similar goals. We're pursuing God, we're pursuing healthy marriages, we're trying to lead our kids to know and love Jesus, and we're educating at home. You know, God created us for community, and the most important kind is definitely the face-to-face kind. That is what he created us for, face-to-face. That's what he had in mind from day one. And that's why I put most of my relational energy that's outside of my own family into my CC community. That's where I've chosen to put most of my relational energy. But there is another valuable community for adults online. So God has given me a heart for homeschoolers on Instagram. And it started at the beginning of the pandemic. As I started to see so many people just shell-shocked coming home from school and wondering, how am I going to get through this? How do you homeschool? Which we all know now what they did was not homeschool. But I wanted to share. My heart went out to them, and so I started to share, this is what it looks like in our home. These are some of the tips and tricks we use. Here are some of our processes, and I just started encouraging. And I was getting a lot of good feedback, so I just kept doing it. I got to take over the CC Instagram feed, and I think from that point on especially, I really transitioned to sharing a lot more about CC specifically and how it looks in our homeschool. You know, most of my community, I'm pretty sure probably a good half, aren't even on social media, which is totally fine. It is very much a personal decision to abstain from social media, but there are some redeeming qualities as it relates to homeschooling. And so I want to share a little bit about that, but start with the caveat that I very, very much am one of the believers that teenagers and below do not belong on social media. So this is just for you adults. Keep your teens off social media. Okay, so think of getting to visit a homeschool friend's house and getting to walk through her homeschool area and getting to say, oh, this is cool. How do you use this? Oh, look at that book. My kid would love that book. Oh, your checklist looks so interesting. Getting to ask all the questions that you have, getting to pick her brain, and then also think about being a fly on the wall when she's actually doing school and saying, oh, I liked how she interacted just then. Oh, wow, look, she blew up just like I do sometimes. Whoops. Or, you know, just getting to see what she's doing. This is sort of like what following a homeschooler on Instagram is like. It just gives you a peek into what they're doing. And one of my favorite parts is it dispels the lie that you're the only one. I think as homeschoolers, we can so quickly fall into that lie, believing that lie that we're the only one. We're the only one whose 8-year-old still can't read. We're the only one who sometimes blow up at our kids. We're the only one whose child doesn't love to learn. We're the only one who fill in the blank for a million things. This lie just binds us up in chains, and it leaves us feeling so hopeless. If you find the people who have similar struggles to you, that is what will break you free of those chains. And probably those people are in your community. However, the times that you find out about those struggles are often most of the time only in intimate settings. And lunchtime on community day ain't intimate. Right? It is chaotic. There's a million people around. Very few struggles get shared at community day, although they definitely do. In my 6 years, I have definitely shared very deeply with people. It just doesn't happen very often. So the thing about social media and Instagram is that you might actually get to see more of that from people on Instagram because it's kind of the point. That's kind of the point of why some people like me choose to share, is that we're sharing what is working and what isn't, and how are we handling different things. And that's where you might see, oh, I'm not alone. How is she dealing with that? What is it that's working for her? What is the encouragement she just shared? Wow. And then you find out you have hope and you've broken free. You realize there is a way out. I can improve. I am not stuck. I can do this. There are lots of great things that you could see for homeschooling on Instagram. So I'm going to share just a few of the ones that I have recently found and enjoyed in my own homeschool. Someone shared about these great books called You Choose History books. They are like Choose Your Own Adventure, but for history. Some of you probably already know those, but I had never seen them before, so I bought a few. My kids love them. They are really quick reads. That was a huge hit. Another more random idea was filling a clear bag full of screen-free activities. Why clear? Because when you fill a solid bag with activities, all that the kids are going to see is what's on top. So the rest of it might as well not even be there. So if you have a clear bag, they can see all of the contents and see all of their different choices. You keep the bag packed, you take it wherever you have to go, where there's waiting involved, where there needs to be quiet, kids not actually bouncing off the walls. It is awesome. I started taking it to CC, and kids would use it before assembly started. You know, all those kids of like tutors and directors who are like all over the place, like ants on an anthill. It helped so much just like keeping them contained. So my entire bag was dumped out and everywhere, but the 20 kids were all playing with it. It was awesome. That was so great. And I saw that idea on Instagram. Someone recently, just this past week, thanked me for sharing about how I let my kids' hands be busy during read alouds. So when I'm reading aloud, I let my kids paint or draw or do yo-yos or Rubik's Cube or Legos, whatever they want to do, as long as they're quiet. And I had shared about that several times, and someone tagged me and said, "Thank you so much for sharing this. This is great." So she was able to implement that because I had shared about it. So that's kind of what happens. You see these great ideas that you didn't even know were ideas. Like, we only have what we have in our heads, right? So sometimes when we see other people's ideas, we're able to put them into practice. Not because we are lacking, but just because we all have more ideas as a collective than we do as an individual. So if you are wondering, how can you find some accounts that might resonate with your homeschool reality? I have a few suggestions for you. You could start by searching for some hashtags. You could search for hashtag homeschool, and you could also search for hashtag classical conversations. And then from there, you would see what accounts are using those hashtags, and you might just spend a couple minutes looking through somebody's profile. What are the kinds of things that they post? Does it look interesting to me? If it does, you can go ahead and follow those people. After a few weeks of following them, you might be like, oh, that person again. If you have that thought, unfollow them. Unfollow them. And let me tell you a secret. Instagram does not send you a message saying, Joe Schmo just unfollowed you. They don't send messages. So do not feel bad for unfollowing somebody. If somebody comes across your feed and you have any sort of drop in emotion, that's probably an indication, don't follow them. So just unfollow. Get good at unfollowing. Instagram has such an easy way. I think it's harder on Facebook to like unfollow somebody. It's super easy on Instagram to just unfollow someone. So take the time to curate who you follow. The reality is, it is going to be a mixture of things that you like and things that you don't like. The Mama Bear apologetics ladies call it the refined art of chew and spit. This is the concept of separating the good from the bad, accepting the good parts, and rejecting the not good parts. So this is something you have to do on social media also. So find the accounts that encourage you, give you good ideas, make you think, point you to Jesus, encourage you, I already said that, and just dump the accounts that don't. Dump the accounts that make you feel like you don't measure up, just unfollow them. And don't forget, we are all different. I think it took me being a director to like really, which is shameful to say, but to really internalize that, like duh, we are all different. We have different circumstances, different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses, different amounts of margin we need to stay sane. So keep that in mind as the comparison monster rears its ugly head. God made us all different, Praise him for that. Find freedom in embracing who God made you to be, not your neighbor. Because God gave you your kids in this season, and he gave your kids you as a parent. None of that was an accident. So find freedom in the chewing and spitting. See the good, apply some things, try some things, dump the rest. If you want to follow me and see if I'm your kind of person, it's okay if I'm not. You can find me on Instagram at Emily the Homeschooler. If I've gotten you interested at all in the benefits of homeschooling with the help of Instagram or with the encouragement of Instagram, but you really don't like some of the other parts, like feeling the pressure to post yourself or having friends and family follow you, I have some secrets for you. Consider creating an account that is only for following a few homeschool people. You can even make up a name and not have a profile picture so that well-meaning friends and family cannot find you. And you don't ever have to like anybody's stuff. You don't ever have to comment. You can just lurk. It's fine. You're allowed to lurk on social media, okay? If you're also afraid or concerned about the time suck that social media can be, that is a very real concern. I confirmed before I came that both Android and Apple devices both have the ability to set time limits on specific apps. So I actually have it set up on my own phone, a certain length of time, and when I reach that amount of time on Instagram, I get a message popped up on my phone that says, "You've reached your time limit." Now I have choices that say like 5 more minutes or ignore for the day or whatever. I'm an adult, I can choose to do what I want, but it really helps to see I've met my limit. So it makes me more thoughtful rather than just like a minute here or there throughout the day can really add up. And I think that's one of the things that people have found about social media and they really don't like. And that's totally legitimate. But this is a really great tool. You could put a low time limit on it and be very disciplined to say, when that message pops up, I am done for the day. That is it. Some of my most favorite things to share on Instagram, specifically CC related, are I loved sharing about essentials this year because my son was in his first year and I was pretty convinced he was going to have a tough time. He's a very different kid than my oldest who breezed through. So from week one, even before essentials started, I was sharing about like what we were doing, how it was going. He did amazing, by the way, but it was really fun to share about essentials. I also love talking about foundations and finding freedom in not adding too much. Add from joy, not from guilt. Adding from guilt will burn you out. I see it over and over again. And I love sharing about my director process, just like how I prep, what kinds of things go on. I love to encourage. I love to just show the reality of what it means to be a director. Recently, we went through the Memory Master process. We love Memory Master at my house. My oldest was a Memory Master 4 times. He went for National Memory Master but didn't make it, but that's okay. And then my youngest just finished, not my youngest, my second son, did it for the second time this year. So we love Memory Master. So I shared a lot about that, like what it looks like at our house, how we do it. I also shared about what it looks like for a director to do director proofs and all that. Super fun. I love sharing about that stuff. You'll find that my homeschool style is simple but efficient and robust. Thank you to CC for that. I love talking about bad attitudes. Anybody else got a kid with a bad attitude occasionally? I have found that a lot of times people will think a drastic change is needed just because their kid has a bad attitude, but I think what's more common or what's actually going on is just that heart work is needed. So I like to encourage people, don't just make some drastic change because your kid has a bad attitude. Meet them where they are, find out what's going on in their heart and help them work through that. This is a chance for them to rise. I love talking about how we need to be teaching our kids truth in the face of the culture that they have been born into. And of course, Challenge is such an amazing partner in that pursuit, but we need to be starting it earlier. So I love to talk about that and share books that I've been reading and thoughts that I have on that. I love to just remind people about the freedom that we have to pace a curriculum to meet the child. And altering curriculums, just because it says cut this and paste that does not mean you have to do it. I did that from day one. I was like, cut this, paste that. No, thank you. I'm not a cutter or a paster. So I have altered from the beginning, but I have realized over time that there are people out there who need permission to do that. This is your permission. Alter that curriculum, make it work for you. So as I close, I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity you've given me to share with you. If you end up following me on Instagram, it would be super fun if you just messaged me so that I can connect the people that I've seen in real life to the people who are just behind a screen. So I'll read a verse and then I am all done. Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Thanks, guys.